Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy and Kurt Leavins. Welcome, both of you.
Hello.
Hello, fellas.
So, guys, I don't know how you're feeling tonight, but I'm feeling oddly deflated. And I usually don't feel this way on draft day. It's usually kind of a day of excitement, but this whole NHL experience, season, being a fan, it's just, for me, it's really hitting hard how off kilter it is right now. And usually the excitement of the draft and the free agent period and all this stuff is a lot more, I feel it usually every year, but it just feels, everything feels off right now. And that feeling, I think, was highlighted tonight because even though I don't know anything about any of these players really that are being drafted, I had an irrational hope that the Oilers would take Seth Jarvis, who was just a killer attacker in Portland this year, 2 points a game. And it looked like they might get him, and they got the 13th overall. And, of course, Carolina, who's analytically inclined, as soon as it was Carolina, I thought they're going to take him for sure. They're not going to pass on a guy with that level of scoring, which is a really remarkable level of scoring that Seth Jarvis had. And I wonder, I don't know, maybe the Oilers wouldn't have taken him even if he had been available. Maybe Holloway was always their pick. And of course, maybe Dylan Holloway, the guy the Oilers took, is going to be a much better player down the road than Seth Jarvis. I have no idea. But I was deflated by that. And then the additional news that Andreas, Athanasiou, and Matt Benning are going to be cut loose by the team. The Oilers Ken Holland has made it clear they're not going to qualify them, and they couldn't work out a deal. So just a couple things kind of got me down. So we'll talk about all of that stuff. How are you guys? How are you guys doing? We'll start with you, Bruce.
I'll add one deflating thing, which was the word of the illness of Connor McDavid. I mean, you want to start about a way to get your week off to a crappy start. I don't know how you could do much more than that. I mean, obviously we don't know any details and we have no idea how it's going to turn out, but at minimum it's concerning, and all you can do is hope for the best and wish the player a rapid recovery.
I saw a comment from Ken Holland this evening where he said he texted back and forth with Connor today, and the report was he's doing well, whatever well means, but a little bit of positive into your gray evening there.
Okay.
Well, Connor, he always gets sick, right? Like he's one of the he's
I've
always
been worried about him getting it. I really have.
I have as well. I mean, in the last 3 years, hasn't he had the flu every year? So it's not. I know this isn't the flu. Don't get me started on that.
He's missed.
I'm with you. I was worried too.
He's missed 3 games at 3 different times with the flu the last 2 years, and the year before that he missed a whole bunch of practices. Never missed any games, but they kept saying, "Well, he's under the weather tonight," and I don't know what it is, but because I mean, obviously he's a remarkable physical specimen to say the least, but. Anyway, here we are.
Kurt, I wouldn't beat yourself up in this case for comparing it to the flu. I mean, if we go seriously, if we go by the science for young people, this is a very scary disease for older people and people with health conditions. But the science does tell us that people under the age of 25, it's very similar kind of disease in terms of its impacts on people, serious health impacts as the flu for people that age. I think that's what I've heard repeatedly from doctors. I don't think I'm making any kind of rash or crazy statement saying that. So I'm not particularly worried about Connor McDavid, and wish him well. But I'm pretty sure he'll be fine. So leave it at that.
And the other word that Oscar Klefbom apparently has arthritis.
That's not good.
27 years old.
Who said that? Where did you hear that?
Oscar Klefbom did.
Oh,
he
God.
said it to Jason Gregor. So
that's I don't know how common that is or what that means. I don't know. That doesn't sound good.
That what it means is that the surgery to clean it up isn't as routine as many surgeries where going in what has to be done, it gets done, and you can say the guy will be ready in 4 to 6 weeks or 4 to 6 months, as the case may be. But this is a little bit more of a uncertain level of surgery that they have to do if they do it.
playing with pain, eh? That's what Ken Holland called it. And now playing with arthritis doesn't sound like it's one of the top things you want to do in life. Like, I know a lot of older people give up hockey when they start to have those kinds of physical problems. So that's really not encouraging at all. Thanks, Bruce.
Something old geezers like me are supposed to get, not young bucks like Oscar Klefbom. Jeez.
Well, this has been fun so far.
Sorry.
Next he'll lose all his hair. Oh, that's really I didn't know that. Oh God, that's really a bummer. Hey, listen, let's be a little bit more positive here, because I know a lot of fans were freaking out about the Holloway pick. But first of all, congratulations, Dylan Holloway. Congratulations to you and your family. You have accomplished something that's really amazing. You are a first-round draft pick in the NHL. He's a big, fast player, two-way player. Just kicked butt in the AJHL a year ago. Came on strong apparently in the second half of his college season at is he in North Dakota? Where is he at? Wisconsin. And is going to a team that has Connor McDavid on it, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Leon Draisaitl on it, loaded with young talent, and has a chance to be part of a winning team. So, and again, there is a lot of people complaining about the Oilers drafting this player, and it's mainly because he wasn't a big point scorer in his year in the NCAA with Wisconsin. I think he put up a point every second game. And there's lots of people right now who are quite rightly analytically inclined in looking at draft picks, and they're really focused on the one stat they can focus on, which is points per game. And he just doesn't measure up in that regard. Like, he doesn't scream out top line talent or even second line talent. What's when you look at that level of scoring, what you're generally looking at is a player who's like a third liner, I guess, in the NHL. The only thing I would say about that is, we heard a lot of the same people complaining super loudly about Philip Broberg last year. And Broberg shares a lot in common with this draft pick. He's a really big player, and he's really fast, really good skater, and little underwhelming offensive stats at the time, and even this past year. So I don't think we hear so much from the Broberg haters right now about Philip Broberg after his red hot start in the Swedish league. That's kind of quieted, and for any of those people who are criticizing Holloway now, he could take off in his second year as a scorer in Wisconsin as well. It wouldn't be surprising at all, and could become first or second line winger in the NHL, which would be a good result from a player drafted 14th. Kurt?
Well, what I hear about this kid, and I know a limited amount about him, to be transparent, but what I hear is that the kid's got dimension. In other words, there's nothing that he does poorly, and there's lots of things that he does well. And I don't know about you, but unless you have super high end one-dimensional talent, I'd sooner have a kid that's well-rounded. The guy has size, he has strength. He has an easy, powerful stride with excellent acceleration from the dead stop, good around the net, drives the net, plays well in all three zones. He's not a sexy pick in that he doesn't come off as a superstar, but you can easily see a kid like this becoming a third-line center, a second-line winger, and have a really solid NHL career. And so I think that's probably the problem a lot of people have with him. This is not a sexy pick, but I think it's a pretty solid pick. And of course, time will prove whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong.
Bruce, you wrote a post on him. What are the scouts saying?
Well, I'm just right now reading right off his page at Wisconsin. I was hoping for a game-by-game log to see how strong the second half was. They don't do that there, but what they say is a 6-foot, 203-pound forward finished the 2019-20 season with 5 of his 8 goals coming over the last 10 games. Holloway had a season-best 5-game point streak, 3 goals, 3 assists from February 7th to 21st. He finished 4th on the team with 84 shots and led the Badgers with 19 penalties. Bragg Creek, Alberta native, was invited to Hockey Canada's virtual 2020 National Junior Team Summer Development Camp. So he's a candidate for Team Canada. And of course, the previous year as basically a rookie in the AJHL, a young player in the AJHL at least, he won the MVP with 40 goals and 88 points in just 53 games. He led that league, not in scoring, but in points per game. He was tops in that league as a young player, and he was one of only two draft eligible players that played in the NCAA anywhere last year. So on the downside, he's one of the oldest eligible players for this year's draft with a September 19th birthday. He was just 4 days shy of qualifying for last year's draft. And he's on a team with two other first rounders from last year's draft, two guys from that celebrated U.S. National Development Team, Alex Turcotte and Cole Caulfield, who both went in the top half of the first round last season. And they are about 8 months older than Caulfield. So they're all 2001 birthdays, but he's a few months behind those guys. And there was only so much ice time to go around for freshmen. And so it sounds like he didn't get as much power play time or maybe top line mates that they did. But that's going on hearsay. I have to admit, I never saw U of Wisconsin play any games, so I can't speak to that.
What else are you in your post, Bruce? What else are some of the scouting experts having to say about this player?
Well, there's kind of a range of skills. I mean, Grant of the recruits site, Grant McCagg, they cite a number of different scouts. One says, "I'm a big fan. He'll play in the NHL. I don't know if he's got a ton of playmaking or scoring ability, but he's strong, a great skater, competitive. He scored 40 in the AJHL the year before, so there's some offense there, and he is a beast physically. I thought he was excellent in the second half. His skating is pro-like already." And then somebody else said, "This guy could be a third liner, fourth liner. I don't see him as a top six guy. Obviously, he's a powerful skater. He hasn't really proved he's a producer." And the third scout in that source said he'll probably be a winger, but able to fill in some games at center. He's smart enough, big enough, and skates well enough. I think on a good team, you're going to get the most out of him on the wing. And of course, he does play both positions. So it's nice to have that versatility, because as Kurt's already mentioned, the Oilers could use either a 3C or a top six winger, the kind of player that they theoretically had in Ryan Strome, that has have since become a gaping hole on the Oilers again. So anyways, he does play center as his natural position, and but already sort of accustomed to making the shift to wing. So
someone mentioned, so he missed the last draft by just a few days, and someone said if he had gone in the 2019 draft, he might not have been taken in the first 3 rounds. An Oilers fan was suggesting. I think that's probably not accurate. I think he probably would have been maybe later in the draft, but maybe late first round, second round. I can't say. Like I don't really rate these players, but that sounds like a bit of a stretch.
Last year he was coming off that terrific season in Olds and joining that big program in Wisconsin, the same place that Caulfield and Turcotte were going to. I would have thought there'd be a little bit of a buzz around the guy. Again, maybe not first round a year ago, and sometimes these older guys, and the Oilers really have a penchant for taking these late birthdays. I think this makes 7 out of the last 11 drafts. And just by pure math, there's only about 30% of draft picks taken who are late birthdays. But the Oilers have taken a lot of them first round, second round. A lot of them.
Any other thoughts on the draft, Kurt? Any other, just watching it, or?
Well, I was really confident that the Oilers were hoping for Jarvis to fall to 14. I know that's who they had their eyes on. Yeah. That's who they wanted. And a lot of people say, will 2020 never end? Well, in this case, will 2006 never end because Carolina gets us again? I wondered when he went to Carolina. I wondered about Gooley, the kid from the left-handed defenseman, because I know the Oilers liked him, but I think with the amount of organizational depth at defense, I think they were pretty convinced that they should pick someone that they could probably play down the middle in their organization. I really don't disagree with that. So.
Holland already said, David, in a column you wrote earlier this week, right in the headline, that he didn't think Oilers would pick a defenseman this year. And it's clearly a thing of organizational need. And when you're getting to the middle of the round, it's not like there's usually one guy that's head and shoulders above everybody else that's left. So the teams with the need will tend to pick to that need.
You know, you picked up on a good point there too, I think, Bruce, because when you look at the various rankings, it's not like the guy we got was ranked like 30th. It's not like that pick was from left field. It was within a place or two of where most of the guys had him. So it's I think the people who are saying this was a big swing and a miss I think they're just looking to make a headline as far as I'm concerned.
He was ranked in the consensus ranking. So I take all the public experts, put them together. There's 20 of them that are pretty prominent, like Craig Button, Bob McKenzie, Corey Pronman, people like this, the most prominent ones. And I think he ranked 17th. So he's taken 14th. So he was, Jake Sanderson, I think, was ranked 12th or 10th or 12th. So like in Ottawa took him 5th. So this was in the normal parameters of an amateur draft. Easily within that. This wasn't like Columbus taking Yegor Chinnikov. I think some of those guys hadn't even. So Button had him ranked 59th, Craig Button. He had just updated his list, and because this guy is off to a good start in the KHL, so he's on. But he was on no other lists to speak of. And in the consensus rankings, he was 133rd. 133rd.
I loved it when the guys at the panel kind of looked around at one another and said, "Do you know anything about this guy?"
Wonder why they didn't trade down there.
Reminded me of the infamous Jussi Niinimäki pick when the commenters had no idea about who the guy was. But yeah, speaking of trading down, now Calgary, that team that recently stole a third-round pick from Edmonton, they were able to trade down twice in a row, and they went all the way down from 17, I think it was, 19 to 24. They moved down just 5 places in the second half of the first round, and they got 2 extra fairly high draft picks out of that. That was the kind of move I was kind of thinking Edmonton might make, especially after Jarvis went, and we were sort of at the next layer of players, and I thought maybe, they'll find a team to trade down. But Calgary found 2 partners that were just a few spots down, but obviously had a player they were really wanted to move on, and they didn't want to take a chance that he'd be gone. So Calgary got a couple more picks out of it. So they'll be dealing from a deeper deck. Well,
for the Oilers.
Yeah, they'll be dealing from a deeper deck tomorrow than Edmonton will, unfortunately.
And they got Connor Zary at 24th. He's an interesting player. He has the same level of draft age scoring as Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in Nugent-Hopkins' draft year. He was 1.5 per game in
he just kept hockey. Falling and falling. Hey, it was it's there's a sign there, right? There's more than one team saw or heard something about him that they didn't necessarily not like, but they just weren't convinced of. So
well, Calgary, I mean, they could have took him at 19, and instead they still got him at 24, plus they got 2 more picks tomorrow. So that's some pretty slick dealing on their part, I'd have to say.
Yep, agree.
I hate to say that, but it's true.
Keep up the cheerful conversation, fellas.
Well, I was interesting to hear that the guy that we did pick, even though he grew up in Bragg Creek, and said at one point his family did cheer for the Flames. He said, "I don't cheer for the Flames anymore, and neither does my family." So it's like, I think Oilers fans were happy to hear that one. So.
Wow.
His dad played in Saskatchewan.
Yes, he was a good hockey player. Yeah, he played in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League in the late 70s. I saw him play. His dad was a good player.
Yeah.
Bruce Holloway,
And yeah, and if he has the same frame that his dad has, then he's big boned as they say. So.
Well, 6'2", 203. It doesn't sound that big, but man, when you actually look at the guys that got picked this year, awful lot of small guys got selected. So he's one of the bigger guys. They're describing him as a power forward.
And I think I heard that 203 might not be up to date and that he may be heavier than that now. I don't know by how much, but I know I heard someone mention that. So
they all looked really tall and really skinny to me, and really young. all the kids that got drafted.
Here's one more for you. Sorry, I heard someone tonight, and I thought it was a really good observation. They said what Holloway is. He's a better skating Sean Horkoff.
Jim Poplinski. All right. Sean Horkoff was a heck of a hockey player in his day.
Yeah, I played with Pep, and Horkoff is a better player than Pep was.
Yes.
He wasn't a bad skater himself, Sean Horkoff.
No, not at all. I agree. But thought that's an interesting comparison to kind of swill around.
Yeah, these picks are, of course, hugely important to the future of the franchise. Tyler Wright has got to get this right. Tyler Wright didn't have a great record in Detroit as an amateur scout, so I can see why people are a bit skeptical. And I don't like Wright wasn't here in Edmonton when we made the Broberg pick, so and I'm not sure if he was in charge in Detroit though when they made the pick of Moritz Seider last year either. Like I'm not sure that if Yzerman still had Wright as the number one guy, or his own guy was the, who replaced Tyler Wright was making the pick then. So, but Wright's record wasn't fantastic in Detroit. It's still early to tell, of course, but the early returns, it was kind of so. Anyway, the other big news is Ken Holland has said that they tried to work out deals with Athanasiou and Benning, but were unable to, and they're not going to be qualifying either of them at this point. Kurt, what do you make of that?
Well, with Benning, I think you had to do it because anybody who's watched Matt Benning for the last couple of years would surely agree Matt Benning's a pretty good 5'6". You know what? He's a pretty good 5'6", but he's paid too much for a 5'6". And every time several coaching staffs tried him out as a 3-4, he couldn't cut it. It's not like they tried him for a couple games. They tried him for long stretches, and it was clear he was not a middle pairing D-man. So I think at some point you got to say he is what he is, and especially in a tight cap, you can get as good as Matt Benning for less as a 5'6", especially with all the $1 million defensemen that will be flooding the market this year. Now maybe they sign him out of free agency for $900,000. Right, yeah, but there's going to be 12 to 15 defensemen as good as Matt Benning that are going to be UFAs here in a week. And so I had more time for Matt Benning than a lot of people did, I think. I understand the move, and I wish Matt Benning well, but I think from an organizational standpoint, I really think it was the correct move.
Bruce?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, he's in that rare subclass of players that actually chose to come to Edmonton. He's an Edmonton native, and he was a free agent. He could have gone anywhere. He came here. He made the team. He barely played any time in the AHL. He just made the NHL straight out of college. And he had, a couple of promising years, and then Peter Chiarelli paid him based on the promise as opposed to based on the accomplishment. And those salaries are a double-edged sword. When they raise the salary, they raise the expectations of the fans, they raise the platform of that qualifying offer. And if by the time that that contract is played out, if he's not at that level yet, all of a sudden he's seen as an underachiever. Now, I don't see Matt Benning as an underachiever, but I do understand that in the 2020 free agency, $2 million marginal dollars could get you 2 players as opposed to 1. And it's a rough situation. I'm a fan of Matt Benning. I enjoyed watching him play. I thought he was feisty. I liked the way he would step up and cream guys. I thought he had a pretty good shot off the point. And he would No, he's a watchable player, and uh, wish him well.
I loved his defensive fundamentals. I,
Hmm.
I don't think, like when I think of Edmonton Oilers defensemen getting beat out of the corner or not covering their man in front of the net, he's almost the last player on the Oilers I would think of in those terms. He was just almost always on the right side of his man in the defensive zone, which is kind of, if you want to hang on in the NHL as a bottom pairing defenseman, that's a pretty good skill to have. And like you said, Bruce, he had a bit of offense. He could get the puck on net. He was really set back by injuries. There's
Yeah.
just no doubt about that in my mind. And they've been ongoing injuries. So, and also, listen, his passing is subpar at the NHL level, and so is his skating. And although he could get by defensively, the Oilers need better players moving the puck this year, even on the third pairing than Matt Benning. They've got to improve from that. And they have a
Yeah.
player in Evan Bouchard who was just an outstanding major junior hockey player. He had a really good year in Bakersfield on the attack. Come on, Evan Bouchard. I know they want to slow whatever, bring these
Walk.
players along, slow walk the players, bring them along slowly. But Evan Bouchard uh, is going to be ready to challenge for a job and maybe even power play time if Clefbaum's out. As Kurt has said a number of times, they can also bring in a veteran, maybe as a 7D or on the as a third D. But if you have Adam Larson, Ethan Bear, and Evan Bouchard as your three right D, I like the sound of that. You got the veteran, you've got the young pro who's proven himself, and you got the up and coming player. That's a good mix, and it's the right price level, and backed up by Lagesson as your seventh D man. That could work for me. And so yeah, you can't. Both of these decisions to me were easy decisions to make. Both of these players in today's NHL are not worth this amount of money. You've got to be very careful with your money. You can't afford them. And that goes for Athanasiou as well.
Oh.
He's not, I don't think anymore, a $3 million a year winger. He's probably more like $2 million or $1.5 million. We'll see what he gets. And there's a lot of Joe Haggerty of the NBC Sports in Boston had this comment to make about the Athanasiou non-qualification by the Oilers. He said, the Oilers gave up 2 second-round picks for Athanasiou at the deadline. Head-scratching asset management. And of course, a lot of the Oiler fans are saying the same thing, but I can't bring myself to say that because at the time that the trade was made, I felt that the Oilers had a chance to go far in the playoffs. I was really happy that they added some players like Ennis and Athanasiou, not so much Green. But those two players, Athanasiou and Ennis, I thought these were reasonable prices to pay. And I just think it's kind of the worst kind of hindsight in a way. Like unfair. I think it's really unfair hindsight on Ken Holland on this one because, as we've said before, COVID happened, which had a two-pronged effect on this. Athanasiou was given much less time to fit in on the Oilers than he normally would have been. About what was 10, 11, 12 games, 10, 11, 12 games at the end of the year. I'm like Ken Holland, 9 games. I'm like Ken Holland here, struggling for the right number and getting it wrong. And so that time was cut in half. The whole playoff experience was kind of weird and truncated because of this.
And then the cap.
And then the cap. Yeah. They would have qualified him easily at to $3 million if it was $85 million, and that's just not in the cards right now. So I'm okay with both moves. Bruce,
Athanasiou? Well, as I said the other day, that the thing about the cap going down by $4 million, it's only 5% of the overall cap, but of the marginal guys that aren't guaranteed contracts, it was like it just put a huge dent in the amount of money Holland had to spend on replacement players. Where he had 5 holes in the roster by my count, and he would have had $12 million to spend on it. That suddenly got crushed down to $8 million. And if you're paying 3 or maybe even more than that on one guy, that really crimps your style elsewhere. And he knows that it's going to ripple through the market. So there's going to be bargains that come up in the market from other teams. I mean, we heard today of a guy like Vinny Hinostroza, who came available. You know, that's a pretty decent player who's going to hit the market because his team didn't qualify him. There's going to be more. Tomorrow afternoon, that deadline tomorrow afternoon is going to be super interesting, I think. and it's going to really change this year's UFA market. Unlike anyone that we've ever seen before, it's going to get flooded with RFAs where you're going, what? They didn't qualify that guy? How'd that happen? But this year it happened because of the cap. That said, Athanasiou's platform was as high as $3 million because it was Holland who gave him the bigger contract before, set the platform, and then it was Holland that made the bet on the guy, and a big bet it was, with 2 second-round draft picks and Sam Gagner for a guy who came here and did not very much. And it's, pretty disappointing to say goodbye to those 2 second-round picks for 9 games of a player and, 4 playoff games.
I've heard from a couple of people that it was Archie Henderson was the guy that really advocated for Athanasiou, that he was the guy who went to bat and convinced Holland to bring him in.
But Holland, Kurt, Holland was there the whole time that Henderson was there. Holland's seen as much as Henderson has. So, yep. And Holland hired Henderson. So Holland has got to wear, he's got to wear this completely as far as I'm
sure,
concerned.
But you know how Holland works, David. He hires his guys and he lets his guys do his job. And so it's my understanding that Archie was the guy who's, is the kind of the head of pro scouting. This is the guy we should get. So, well, I'm not suggesting that some of this shouldn't stick to Ken, but if your chief scout is making a call to spend that many assets on that guy and that's all you got out of it, I'd suggest to you at least 50% of it sticks on your head scout.
Oh yeah, he wears some of it too. And we're looking at this whole triad of Holland, Henderson, and Wright that all came over from Detroit. Now we have a GM and our head pro scout and our head amateur scout or chief scout or whatever the heck they call them, and their watch has started, and some of the early moves, you have to question. Athanasiou, what did he do? He came here, he got a goal and assist in his first game, and then nothing, 0 points in the last 12 games, including the play-ins. 0 points.
You know what I didn't like about Athanasiou was the lack of hustle. Honestly, in the playoffs, I'm sitting there watching him why aren't you forechecking harder? Why don't you get on? You're this fast player and you're just kind of cruising around. You're not in the play. It just made me question what's with this player. What do you think was
with him?
I don't think he fit in with Draisaitl and Yamamoto. I think he was lost on that line. He didn't know what to do. I think he was on the wrong line. He was on a line of players that give and go the puck and have high hockey IQs. He ain't that player. He's a player that needed a more simple role on the team. Go hard to the net, come back hard on the back check. We want you to do 2 things. That's it, Andreas. 2 things. Hard to the net, hard on the back check. And you have enough otherwise skill that you'll get by. So I personally don't think Tippett did a great job with this player at that time. But I also blame the player for not figuring it out either. So Kurt,
I wonder if you gave the Oilers coaches truth serum and asked them, so how many players were you happy with what shape they came back in after the pause? I wonder what they'd say.
You seem like you might know something, Kurt. I just have my spider senses are tingling.
It's you're right. A fast guy like Athanasiou didn't look fast in the playoffs. I wonder why that was.
That's really disappointing. That's even less reason to celebrate tonight.
And I think the last time we talked, I think I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if Ken Holland went to Darren Ferris, Athanasiou's agent, and said, you know what, why don't we try a 1-year, $2 million contract? Right. But remember, I said at the time, Ferris is not a guy with a reputation for giving hometown discounts. It's the opposite. He really goes to bat for his players, and good on him. But I think the fact that Ken went at the agent and came back with nothing shouldn't come as a shock, considering who he was talking to.
Well, obviously Ferris did a pretty good job ringing $6 million over 2 years in the previous contract, the one that set the platform. But
too bad.
I can't see him getting that this time around. Can you?
No. I was just going to say I'll be very interested to see what this player actually commands on the open market, and if there's even one team out there that says we still think this is a $3 million or even a $2.5 million player, or maybe says, hey, this is a 26-year-old guy who can skate and score. Let's go deep.
Too bad Nygaard wasn't healthy. Like, I get the sense that he really wasn't that healthy, because he would have been a better pick if Athanasiou really wasn't, if he was not in top shape coming back to camp. If they could put in Nygaard, that would have worked out better for everybody, and sent a message to that player like, that's not acceptable.
Yeah, but from what I understand, Nygaard's injury the heart was there, but the body wasn't.
The same injury. He still got the same injury in Sweden. I reported originally because I heard that he broke the same finger, but actually he did nothing to the finger. It just wasn't healed, and he had to get a second surgery on the same finger that he got done before. He played one game. He played through pain, and he said, "I can't do this. I gotta get this fixed." So.
Too bad. I really like that player.
Yeah, I mean, if he hadn't got hurt in January, they may never even needed to make the trade for Athanasiou for all we know.
Yes, it's a very good point. But the flip side of all this is now you've got Athanasiou and Benning's money to spend on something else. I mean, it really all of a sudden changes the complexion of what Ken Holland might be able to do here in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Taylor Hall.
$5 million. $5 million in this market is a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Yeah. It's a big buyer's market. I'm with you there, Bruce.
What do you think of some of these? Like, there was talk today of Marc-Andre Fleury being available, $3.5 million, and you get a second pick. And I was looking at it, I think, that sounds enticing, but when you think about it, $3.5 million is a lot of money for a backup goalie who's been kind of league average the last 2 years and is getting older. And then there was the Tyler Johnson thing where Tampa wants Johnson is now 30 years old. He's got 4 years left on a contract that pays him $5 million a year. And Tampa apparently wanted a first-round draft pick for this player. Like, what are they smoking? Like, I just think that's crazy talk. He's probably got negative value.
They're looking for the JT Miller magic to strike again. Last year they got a first-round pick for JT Miller, and you know what? Vancouver got value for that first-round pick.
They did.
But Tyler Johnson, age 30 in this market, Tampa's between a rock and a hard place. I mean, this is a real bad time to be trying to be clearing out $5 million support players, and they got several of them.
He's a good player, Tyler Johnson. I shouldn't be so harsh. But his level of even strength scoring is the same as Andreas Athanasiou for the last 2 years, which is not bad, a bad level of scoring. 1.9, about 1.9 points per 60. Tyler Toffoli's in that same range. Jake DeBrusk. Athanasiou has good numbers. Like, if you go back 2 years, I should say, and average it all out over 2 years, which I think is fair for a younger player to do. But Tyler Johnson just struck, like, I don't know, like, can they even move a player like that? I guess probably maybe a team like Detroit, like, or Ottawa, who's really desperate for a player, or Montreal even might go for that. But I don't see anyone giving like maybe that was just a joke. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that was made up, and someone's, as Ken Holland said, made up by someone in their living room playing GM, and it wasn't related to the truth.
Well, Tampa's got to come out and ask for something for him, and then they'd be quickly prepared to come off that asking price. But if they, if they come out and say, well, we want to give you a first-round pick and Tyler Johnson as our starting position, like Vegas has done with Fleury, I mean, I find that a strange negotiating stance. But.
Any predictions for Oilers transactions this coming week, guys? Kurt, anything?
Well, I think if the Clefbaum thing had not transpired, I think they were shopping for two things and maybe two things only. A goaltender, Koskinen level goaltender, and someone who is a real third line NHL center. And I still think, even with Clefbaum's injury, I still think those are the top two things on their list. And I do wonder if the whole Clefbaum thing changes the complexion of what happens with Chris Russell. Suddenly, I think he was always valuable to the team. He might be more valuable now. So I think I'm looking for a goaltender. I'm looking for a third line center. And I wouldn't be surprised if they sign a depth NHL defenseman for like $1 million. That would be my prediction.
Bruce?
Yeah, there's going to be a few of those $1 million guys out there. I mean, the one thing they could do with Chris Russell is trade him for another $4 million contract where the other guy's getting paid, so the other team wants to move a guy, and the Oilers actually improve by making such a deal, either by trading Russell for a goalie or for maybe another veteran defenseman that's just one step above Russell. I mean, that $2.5 million cushion that he's prepaid has value on this market.
It does.
And so, I mean, I'm just spitballing. They trade him for Alex Goligoski. Now, I couldn't tell you that Alex Goligoski's a better player than him. I can tell you he's getting the same cap hit, but they actually have to pay him all that money in Arizona, and they don't want to do that. So you could probably find a trade of that nature. I don't expect it, but it's possible.
See, the thing that worries me is if Clefbaum is out, I have no problem with Ethan Bear and Evan Bouchard, being two of your top six defensemen. I don't have any trouble with Caleb Jones being two of your top six defensemen. But think of the inexperience of those three D-men. And if you consider that, I then think that the experience and the ability to still, on the left-hand side, to still be a middle pairing defenseman, I think, I wonder if the Oilers are thinking twice about moving Chris Russell for that reason.
Yeah, I agree, Kurt. I think it changes that considerably. Unless they can get a similar player to Russell, maybe they could get on a $1 million a year contract, which is possible.
Yep.
Then they could trade Russell for the third line center that they need, or a winger to play with McDavid. So, but I'm very bullish on Caleb Jones as a player, and I just really think the Oilers need to improve their puck moving. So if you have both Russell and Larson back, that's you're getting into iffy territory in terms of puck moving as a group. You are replacing Benning with Bouchard probably at this point then. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge, significant improvement. Caleb Jones, I think, is equal to Oscar Clefbaum as an even strength puck mover. We'll see how he can handle the defensive end of things, but I don't see him being inferior to Clefbaum as a puck mover, even in tough moments against tough competition, because that's Jones's strength of his game. He can really move that puck. So, but yeah, I think Russell is far more likely than he was before to be around. I would have expected him to move today, honestly, for a draft pick. But I guess they can still trade him for a draft pick tomorrow if that's going to happen. Like, I didn't think he'd get a first-round draft pick for Chris Russell. No, but maybe they'll be able to get a third or fourth-round pick for Chris Russell. I don't know what I was reading from a number.
Sorry, David. I was reading from a number of general managers tonight that were saying that the chatter has really picked up on the phones tonight, and a number of them were projecting that it would be a much busier tomorrow than today was. So.
Alrighty, well, why don't we leave it there, gentlemen, unless any other thoughts, or is that good? Good to go? Bruce?
My only thought is that there was 5 players in the top 14, including the one Oilers picked, who were 16-year-olds playing at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, the first one in Edmonton in 2018. Now, 2 years and 2 months ago, that we got our first look at Alexis Lafreniere, Lucas Raymond, Alexander Holtz, Yaroslav Askarov, and Dylan Holloway. They all played in that tournament. They all won medals in that tournament, and they weren't even draft eligible that year. They were the next class behind, but good enough to make that tournament and succeed in it. And now, lo and behold, so getting that tournament was a real boon for Edmonton to get to see, the future, because there was a lot of guys that got picked in the first round last year. Dylan Cousins and numerous players from that draft, and then already 5 more this year. So this year I felt in some ways more tapped into some of these top prospects than I'd actually seen them play.
You're the king of that stuff, Bruce. I don't have enough room in my head for those things. I don't know how you do it.
I went to a bunch of games, so I actually saw some of these guys play. Now, I can't say that I got nothing specific to tell you about Dylan Dylan Holloway, but I sure was taken by that Swedish pair. Boy, oh boy, Raymond and Holtz. Good players.
Alrighty. Kurt, thanks for joining us tonight.
Happy to be here, guys.
And Bruce, always great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for talking. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.